Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, this time yesterday I was in a really good mood because it was pouring down with rain. If we'd recorded the pod then, I'd have been chipper like anything, but now it's horrible and sunshiny. As always, Kieran, I was going to say you bring a cloud into my life and cheer me up, but that doesn't work, does it?
Now, I'm irritatingly cheerful, as always. You'll be delighted to know. I'm
always delighted to know that you're cheerful, Kieran. You're like a Dickens character. Nothing can shake you out of your cheerfulness. Well, actually, some of the news stories this week, mate, shake you out of the cheerfulness. It's our prediction that perhaps in the summer some of the news might get better is optimistic. But there's also a news story tucked away here, Kieran, I think it's gone under the radar a little bit, but I think might be one of the most significant stories we've covered for quite some time on the pod when we get to that. It's about a broadcasting deal, which no one else really seems to be talking about. We interviewed Paul from Reading FC supporters group, Kieran, and things are clearly not good at that club, but it's almost like the owner of Southend United heard that and decided to raise him several points in the poker game that is playing with a football club.
Yes, it's two red lights and one green, I would say, in respect of Southend. We've said this before. Ron Martin likes to play a game of chicken with the authorities in terms of not paying tax. I don't like that. I think it's unprofessional. But if I'm honest, the tax authorities eventually, if they get their tax, then it's an annoyance. When it comes to people, it's different. And by all accounts, people have gone unpaid at Southend United once more, as far as their June pay packets are concerned. And we're recording this on the 5th of July, so we don't know whether they've been paid since. And the players have said, well, why should we be treated in such a manner? And they've effectively gone on strike. They've said, well, we're not going to turn up to training. If you're not prepared to do your side of the bargain and pay us, why should we keep our side of the bargain? And the tragedy is that the National League fixtures were announced today, and Southend United fans, doesn't matter what division in, doesn't matter what league you're in. When fixtures come out, you always rush and you start to put things in diaries, and you're looking for some of the, some of the matches which have got more excitement, due for historic or cultural reasons than any others. And Southend United fans are doing this with a heavy heart because it is a poor show. There is a potential loss of players due to breach of contract. We saw a player move out of Southend United earlier this year. How on earth the manager is going to be able to recruit players? Because the first thing you think about when you move into a job, and let's be honest, the money. A, how much is it? And B, there's always an assumption that it's going to be there at the end of each month. And with Southend United, that sort of toss a coin. So that's why I say I think two red lights, but there is one green in the sense that I believe that conversations are taking place between Ron Martin and an organisation called the Guimaraes Group, who seem to have some form of connection to Ray Winston. Who apparently his nan used to live in Southend, so he's got a tenuous link with the club.
Kieran, I'll just stop you there. His dear old nan.
Dear old nan, sorry, yes. So he says, I'm all for this, and clearly he's a man with a bit of gravitas, and the local press have picked up on this. But he says, I don't want to be a director, which actually I think is quite wise.
Yeah.
There, Ray. But I went on to my very good friends at Company's House, as you can imagine, and had a look. And the Guimaraes Group, they've only got a turnover of about £2.5 million a year. So it doesn't appear to be a very big organisation. And then Ray Winston said there was a bit of a conflict of interest with something called Integral Sports Management. So again, I go onto Companies House, I look up Integral Sports Management, and it's got 3 employees. So I just not sure where this particular takeover is going in terms of where are these potential new owners getting their funding from. So that is sort of a downside, but I'm sure Southend fans have reached the point, and I suspect many of the staff have done as well, in the sense of anybody apart from Ron Martin. And of course, we've been there on many occasions before. Yeah, we've seen that with Wigan. We've seen that with potential things at Rochdale and other clubs, whom we might even mention later in the show. So there's other things which do concern me, which I'd rather not talk about because I don't want to prejudice anything. But it's not good at all. But the one thing I would say is we have been there before, and eventually he always seems at the in injury time to find the money to pay off the next instalment that's due to HMRC. But it's not a clever way to run a football club.
How's that company spelt, Kimura?
Kimura.
Oh, okay, right. So not as in the Mafia's implacable opponents in southern Italy. Okay. No. You mentioned the staff, Kieran. We don't know at the moment whether it's only the players that have gone unpaid. But if it is the staff that have also gone unpaid, they don't really have the option of walking out, do they? We spoke about this with our Reading fan the other day. We've mentioned it before. The people who work at football clubs tend to be fans of the club. They would be within their rights to withdraw their labour if they weren't paid for a third month on the road. But it's kind of easier for players to do that, because players also know that they have got a 99% of getting a move to another club anyway, which the staff have not got that certainty at all. So it's always with the staff that you feel more sympathy than anybody else. Well, of course you sympathise with the players, but it's much harder for the people who work at the club, Kieran, isn't it?
It is, and let's be honest, the majority of people who are working in the back office at Southend United are Southend United fans, have got an affection for that. And I know enough about football to know that they will be on third quartile or fourth quartile wages in terms of how much they're being paid. So they're on not great sums to begin with, and then they're not getting them. And like all of us, standing orders, direct debits, the summer's coming up. People want to, in football, you'd hope that most will have had a break by now, but it just takes things away from when you're starting to gear up for the new season directly or indirectly.
However, pressure or otherwise, Ron Martin is feeling, Kieran, and I'm going to try and keep the introductions to the rest of the pod as straightforward as possible, because I mixed enough metaphors in the introduction to the Southend story to last for 3 pods, to be perfectly honest. But you sounded like a cartoon character. You sounded like a bit of Woody Woodpecker leading up to. However pressure or not Ron Martin is under, he's in a happier place at the moment than the owner of Fleetwood Town.
Yes. And yesterday, we're recording this on the Wednesday. On the Tuesday, I'd been invited to the National Crime Agency, and they were having a conference, which is sort of the Joint International Crime Centre conference in respect of organised crime and disorganised crime in sport. And for reasons best known to themselves, I'd been asked to talk for 90 minutes. So I gave this talk to the delegates, and there were people there from Europol and Interpol and from HMRC and many crime organisations across the world. Sadly, nobody from AC12, which I was really hoping for. But you can't have it all. You can't have it all.
Kieran, are you sure this wasn't an elaborate honey trap trying to find out where Uncle Terry is? the finest minds in European policing thought, well, there's only one shot. Maybe we can get him through. We can get him through Kieran. Send him an email saying we're not FIFA. We will pay you.
Oh, they didn't pay me. I asked for cash, and
that'll be why then.
Yeah, it'll probably be why. So I gave this talk, and sort of the central theme of the talk was, why do so many untoward people buy a football club? And my argument was that it gives you kudos, it gives you credibility, it gives you legitimacy, it gives you influence as well, because people think, rightly or wrongly, that if you own a football club, you've got quite a high standing. So I'd finished the talk at 3:30, and you know what a nerd I am. I did 89 minutes and 30 seconds of it, and then as I was leaving, somebody says, "Have you seen this?" And Andy Pilley, who is the owner of Fleetwood Town, now he did resign as a director in May, has just been put down for 13 years for fraud. And this is quite an elaborate activity in terms of sort of energy contracts and so on. A lot of people have lost out. And you know, it is a story we covered at the time, I think, when he was found guilty. But I think everybody's been taken aback by the severity of the sentence. And it doesn't reflect well on him. And some people have said to me, well, hold on, you know, what about the owners and directors test? Well, I think when he acquired the club, it was pre that date. But how would the EFL have any knowledge with regards to his fraudulent activities? Although, you know, there have been some people alleging that he's had his collar felt before. So what's happening to Fleetwood Town? The club's been losing a lot of money, and Andy Pilley, through his other companies, has been subsidising these losses. And this is something which I'm always concerned about in respect of what happens to an individual club when the owner's circumstances change. You know, we saw that at Wigan recently, and the owners come in for a lot of criticism. I mean, I don't know how many people are aware that his son tragically died, and he just lost all interest. And I can, as dads, we can, our heart goes out for anybody that goes through those circumstances. So that didn't help, and then. Yeah, there's been other owners whose personal circumstances, or they just lose interest, you know, as happened with Mel Morris at Derby. So Andy Pilley has been subsidising Fleetwood Town, and now you wonder, well, how is it going to be funded in future? The club has effectively been transferred to his children, who were appointed as directors in March. Whether they have the facilities and the resources to subsidise, and the club's probably losing around about $40,000 a week. You know, we're talking big potatoes here. So that's where we are. But he had a higher profile because he was one of the 92, and that's the benefit that football brings, and it therefore attracts, like a moth to a flame, you know, the likes of Matt Southall and Lawrence Bassini and Steve Dale and others who we could spend a long time listing them.
He also owns a club in Ireland, didn't he? Or he did, Waterford, is that right?
Yes, he did. And that had caused some consternation, because I think that there was conflict between the sort of the two sets of fans, not between them directly, but if he's putting money into our club, why is he also putting it into yours? Why can't he put more money into our club to make it go further? And trying to work out the benefits of that were complex. Although that for all we know could be another one of the consequences of Brexit, where you can't transfer young talent across the water at the ages of 16 and 17 due to loss of freedom of movement.
Where do the EFL stand, Kieran, on Andy Pilley's fraudulent activities? It is an interesting one. They would probably argue that there's nothing they can do until he was proven guilty. But certainly, I mean, Private Eye, for example, have been exploring, shall we say, what he's been up to for quite some time. So it was in the public domain that this was being investigated. A lot of people, a lot of small businesses have gone bust because of the fraudulent contracts he locked them into for their energy. So there surely is an argument that, again, the EFL should have been keeping a closer watch on this, and perhaps you don't have to wait till someone's proven guilty, do you, when it comes to saying they're still not worthy of owning a football club?
Even if you reach that conclusion, what do you then do? Because how do you force somebody to sell shares in a company when you've already approved them to buy those shares in the company? So I think the EFL are on a sticky wicket, unlike the Australian cricket team. But I don't really see what else they can do other than just try to ensure that people like Andy Pilley don't come into football in the future.
We're recording this on Wednesday evening, Kieran. I'm going to get an early night just so I'm up, because 10:30 in the morning is quite early for me, but I'm going to be there to see what happens when the Australian players arrive at Headingley. I hope to God, Kieran, that this is the last time we ever have to say these two clubs' names in the same sentence, Cardiff and Nantes.
Yes. Cardiff have now been told by FIFA that they have to pay the remaining 2 instalments of the transfer fee in relation to the sadly deceased Emiliano Sala to Nantes. That transfer went through a couple of years ago. There was an initial payment, I think, of €6 million, and then there was 2 further payments totaling €11 million. And we've established and we've often discussed that football is very much an instalment sport these days. Cardiff initially refused to pay the initial amount, saying that, in their opinion, the player wasn't theirs. That became quite an unpleasant legal argument. Cardiff lost that. They then were late in paying on the due date to Nantes, so that triggered a reaction from the EFL in terms of sanctions. And now we've got this situation where they've been obliged to pay. I don't know the dates for that. At the same time, Cardiff have pointed out that some of the officials of Nantes have themselves been arrested or interviewed by the police with regards to misfeasance or alleged misfeasance, which doesn't reflect well potentially on that club, although I think two things are independent. And they are also putting through a claim in the French court system, effectively for damages, by saying, well, if Emiliano Sala had arrived, he would have scored the goals, which would have helped them to avoid relegation from the Premier League in that particular season. And therefore, they've lost out on a minimum of 1 one further year's worth of Premier League money, as well as more further year of parachute payments. So, what's going to happen here? A, it's going to take a long time. B, it's going to look grubby because there's still a family grieving. And C, the lawyers are going to win.
Well, that's it, Kieran. I mean, the lawyers always win, but every single time it's on the news or in the newspaper, that family, their opportunity to rest and grieve properly is put back again as well. So it needs to be resolved. It really does. Some Leicester City fans, Kieran, may have argued that their club wasn't that competitive on the pitch in the season that's just finished, but it seems like they were trying to be not competitive off the pitch as well, in news that literally came in 30 minutes before we started the pod. Yes.
Leicester have been fined £880,000 by the Competition and Market Authority, which is what we remember as the Monopolies and Mergers competition. And this is on the back of being accused of effectively operating a cartel. And a cartel is where you've got 2 or more organisations which work in concert with another to make things worse for consumers. And the other party here is JD Sports. And I believe that JD Sports used to have an offer whereby if you spent more than £70 on anything, you got free shipping. And the trouble was, if you did that potentially and you bought some Leicester City kit, it worked out cheaper than buying it from the club itself. So therefore, the two parties appeared to have come to some form of agreement that the Leicester City was excluded from this particular arrangement. And that was deemed to be to the detriment of consumers. And it's got to be said that in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the prices of kits is eye-watering this season. Bournemouth announced their kits last week. I think they've gone up 20 to 25%. I think as Bournemouth kits go, I think it looked really good, which was a shame. I was looking at the kits of Spurs. And the range of kits that you can now have, you've got your three your three match day shirts in different flavours in terms of cost. But then you've got the drill top, the warm up top, the training top, and you can have an elite drill. I don't know what a drill top is. I thought that was something you get from B&Q, but it doesn't seem to. Doesn't seem to make sense. But if you want an elite drill top, whatever that is, 110 sheets for something which is going to be out of fashion in 12 months. And I've got to be honest, it's not of particularly high quality because it's stuff that they churn out. So I think regardless of the CMA investigation into Leicester, the price of football kits this season has reached incredible levels.
Well, I mean, Bournemouth fans as well are paying more for tickets as well as kits this season. But I mean, the thing is, you could spend £300 on your elite drill top. You could walk into Pawson's. No one in that pub's going to look up and go, "Hello." Kev seems to be wearing the elite drill top. They just look up and go, "It's too small for you, mate." This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by some breaking news from Manscaped. They are revolutionising men's grooming once again with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look like never before. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your curtains match your carpet. And you could do that by going to manscaped.com and using code PRICEOFFOOTBALL for 20% off and free shipping.
The Beard Hedger cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. Plus, it's waterproof, so you can use it and shave yourself in the shower to avoid all of that hair in the sink. The titanium-coated T-blade is tough on hair, but smooth on your face, leading to single-stroke efficiency. The Pro Kit doesn't end there, though. It includes beard shampoo and conditioner, beard oil, beard balm, a beard brush, a comb, and scissors to ensure your beard is ready to impress.
The beard balm. Oh, it smells lovely. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code PRICEOFFOOTBALL at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code PRICEOFFOOTBALL. Manscaped Beard Hedger, one stroke, one guard, 20 lengths. In the scheme of things, Kieran, this £800,000 fine, is that a lot of money or is that a slap on the wrist type amount of money?
It's symbolic. It's the maximum amount that the CMA could fine Leicester. So I don't think it reflects well on governance. The fact that nobody wants to think that their club has been colluding with another organisation to ensure that fans are effectively out of pocket. And I think that's the thing that will upset Leicester City fans most of all. I mean, they, as usual, would expect you see on social media some fairly waspish comments along the lines of, well, they didn't appear interested in wearing the kit last season anyway. So it just sort of adds fuel to the fire that the fans were being ripped off. But it's it's not good. I'd love to have more. Yeah, I started off saying I was irritatingly cheerful, and you rightly predicted that within 20 minutes it would wear me down, and it has done.
Also, can you imagine in 30 years' time there being a nostalgia market for the 23-24 Elite Drill Top?
Yes.
Oh, he's got that one with the 2023. It's really tight, and you can only just see the sponsor's name. What happened to that sponsor? They went bankrupt when we got relegated to the National League. Remember? Oh, the happy days, yeah. We've talked a lot about the multi-club ownership model, Kieran, and we've talked about theoretical conflicts of interest, but a Premier League club, it's no longer theoretical, is it?
No, and it could affect another club, I suspect, but we'll have to wait and see there. So this is Aston Villa. The owners of Aston Villa, Wes Edens and Naz Sawiris, they owned 45% of the Portuguese club, and my pronunciation's a bit bobbins, Vitoria de Guimaraes. And as under UEFA rules, if you have significant influence over more than two clubs, and significant influence is deemed to be 30% or more, although I think the EFL for their clubs are saying it's 25%, but that's a separate issue. But because of this, the owners have had to reduce their stake in this Portuguese club from 45 to 29, i.e. just below the threshold. They've also had to withdraw common directors because both clubs are playing in the Europa Conference in 23-24, which therefore brings into focus Brighton Hove Albion and Union Saint-Gallois, who are both owned by Tony Bloom. Now, Tony Bloom says he's not involved on a day-to-day basis, and by all accounts he isn't, and it's run by somebody else. But both of those clubs are in the Europa League next season. So I think that's a case of, if they get a call from UEFA, how do they respond? What would happen to the investment there? We have to wait and see. But this overall issue of multi-club ownership and integrity of the sport is only going to grow and grow. We've got these competitions operating within Europe itself. We've got more and more owners taking a multi-club model, and then if they say, well, okay, we're not going to buy clubs in Europe, we're going to buy clubs in other continents, what's going to happen when FIFA's 32 club FIFA World Cup of clubs kicks in the USA in 2025? It all starts to get a bit messy and a bit Machiavellian if there is the opportunity to have influence over more than one club, because we don't want what we remember from one or two World Cups when results gave the impression of not being particularly sporting in nature.
Yeah, West Germany, Austria is one in particular.
Yeah.
Argentina, Peru as well. Far be it for me to criticise any aspect of Brighton and Hove Albion, Kieran, and the impeccable, nay, saintly way in which they are run, obviously, with the collusion of the Premier League and their cheating fixture list. But Tony Bloom, it's kind of disingenuous, regardless of what role you play on a day-to-day basis. If you part own both clubs, your role on a day-to-day basis is academic, isn't it? Really?
Well, I think there is a case for investigating that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I agree. Let's do it. You've got mates in Interpol. Get them on the line.
Right.
I'm very. What's his stake in Saint-Gallois?
I think he is the majority owner.
Okay, right.
And again, for the sake of transparency, that there have been quite a few transfers and loan deals between the two clubs, because when Brighton signed Mitoma for $2.5 million, about 18 months ago, the first thing they did was that they sent him to St. Gallois to get some experience of European football, and then he came to Brighton to tear up the league this last season.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Kieran, it just makes me even more proud of being a Palace fan, the way my club maintains its integrity in this sort of situation by refusing to qualify for Europe. I think that's
Hat is doffed, Kevin. Hat is doffed.
I think it's a remarkable gesture on our part. Two stories involving the Premier League here, and the second of which is the one I'm really interested to explore. The first of which basically is confirmation of something you predicted on the Questions pod a couple of weeks ago about live TV coverage of every Sunday game.
Yes. By all accounts, what we will be seeing is an expanded deal from the Premier League. At present, of the 380 matches which take place in a season, 200 are sold to broadcasters. But what we have seen in recent years is that as a result of the Europa League and the Europa Conference taking place on a Thursday night, we've got often 2 or 3 matches, if not more, taking place on a Sunday afternoon, and those are not being broadcast. What I suspect will happen, that the Premier League will aim to sell these particular rights to domestic broadcasters. And then, because, and I absolutely understand this from the perspective of Sky or TNT Sport, or as it's currently known, and we could have new players in the market. They don't want to cannibalise themselves unless they have to. So expect to see a midday kickoff, 2 p.m. kickoff, a 4:30 kickoff, and a 7 p.m. kickoff, which is great for broadcasters. I got to be honest, if you're that way inclined, it's great for viewers. You can effectively just strap yourself into the sofa and watch football for as many hours as you so desire. The interests of fans, I don't think, would be high on the list of considerations as far as the people negotiating, because they just want to maximise the dollar.
Mm. This next story, Kieran, whether it's to do with cricketing shenanigans, whether it's to do with tennis, I don't know, but it's been so far barely covered in the media. But I sense that this is a huge story in the making. Basically, it involves the FA's international media rights and the Premier League.
Yes, so this was originally broken by Sports Business, and it was also picked up by The Times, and they both discussed this on the Tuesday night. Now, what appears to be the case is, if these stories are true, and what we've got at present is a degree of supposition, but the journalists involved from the Times are pretty senior, and also the Sports Business guys, they've been in contact just to confirm bits and pieces as well. So they wouldn't put these stories out unless they had some degree of traction. The FA's international rights have been sold, and they've been generating around about £100 million a year. So they bring in decent money, and there's no doubt that the FA needs money in order to support grassroots football, to support the England team, the Lionesses, and so on. And that is great. But what appears to be the case is the Premier League has come in and said, tell you what, we'll look after the rights for you, and we'll effectively guarantee you some form of sum. Now, this isn't the same as a bribe, because, of course, the FA, for people that don't know, the FA do have a golden share in the Premier League, so it's not a bribe or anything like that. Before people start, tapping noses and getting a bit giddy about that, but it does mean that the Premier League, to a certain extent, will have control over the FA in terms of its most prestigious competition. And there is no doubt that there are some clubs, I'm not accusing this of all clubs, there are some clubs in the Premier League who find the FA Cup as a bit of a bind. Yes, they'd like to win it, but they don't want any disruptions to their opportunities to compete in other European competitions, to tie up time where they'd rather be doing pre-season tours, which are more lucrative, and so on. And my fear would be that, with the from again, we have a friend who we refer to as the secret broadcaster. And the secret broadcaster was saying, well, this is how I potentially could see it going. You'll keep the third round on a Saturday because even the Premier League doesn't have the chutzpah to say one of the things which is so traditional in football is we're simply just going to cancel it. But no replays beyond the third round, and the rest of the FA Cup becomes a midweek competition, freeing up Saturdays and Sundays. That means you can have a more condensed Premier League competition, which more condensed Premier League competition means that there's the opportunity to have a bigger pre-season, bigger post-season, and for these clubs to make more money. And if that is the case, could we therefore see the EFL's international rights potentially going the same way? Now, there's a lot to be said for the Premier League going into global markets and saying, look, we can offer you the whole of English football. How much are you prepared to pay for it? And if that is the case, and the money is fairly distributed, then it could be a winner. But it's that last part of that last sentence which would give me cause for concern. The Premier League is creating potentially here a dependency culture on the FA to the Premier League, which will weaken the FA's position. And I've got to be honest, the FA at times has come across as being quite weak in terms of resistance to the juggernaut that is the Premier League.
It turns out, Kieran, I have such a soft, gentle, dainty nose that you couldn't hear it even when I was tapping it furiously. This strikes me. Does this include the rights to England games as well, or is it just FA Cup? Do we know?
No. This would be the FA Cup, as far as I'm aware. The international rights, there tend to be separate deals arranged with FIFA and so on. And they also, because of the crown jewels rules, they tend to be dominated by the terrestrial broadcasters. Although, what's going to be left of BBC and ITV in a few years, who knows?
But also a couple of questions, Kieran, that have raised from, as you say, talking to our secret broadcaster and one or two other people in the game who have been in contact with us about this is, first of all, Kieran, should there not have been a bidding process for this? Should this not have gone out to tender? And has it been rushed through before an independent regulator can say, hang on a second, this doesn't look right?
Well, I think you've raised a really good point here. From what I've been told was that there will be the equivalent of a nominal tender process, right, just to go through due legal. But the other parties involved know that they're effectively not going to be in the room, and therefore, I think the other parties just won't bother. Why? Yeah. If it's a stitch up, as it is perceived to be, and again, we're going here from people who have contacted us in the last 24 hours to raise their concerns. And if you read the article in the Times and in Sports Business, there appears to be a degree of consternation in terms of the ever-increasing concentration of power within football in this country. It's a funny one. As one of my lecturers, when I started to learn about the world of finance, said to me, if ever you're in doubt about something and it looks a bit strange, it comes down to two things: power and money.
Well, I share that consternation, Kieran, because it does look to me like one more step towards the Premier League basically running all of football, doesn't it? I mean, it certainly sidelines the FA to a huge degree, it seems to me.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And of course, it would be really beneficial if the Premier League has this signed, sealed and delivered before the independent regulator arrives, because effectively the regulator is having to deal with contracts which are cast iron and can't be changed.
Yeah. I can't comment, Kieran, on the tightness or otherwise of Nottingham Forest and Leeds United's training wear, but both of them have new sponsors for it.
Yes, and I think we just raised this because I think it's Eon who are doing this, but what we are seeing more and more, and again, you can understand it from the point of view of the club, is that they are having separate deals for front of shirt, shirt sleeve, and now training kit. And certainly the likes of Manchester United and Chelsea and Liverpool have had very, very lucrative deals in recent years. And that appears to be extended to a much broader market. Nottingham Forest went through last season not having a front of shirt sponsor because from what you hear and from what you get whispered, I think they'd said the minimum price that they'd accept was more than the maximum price that anybody was prepared to pay. Both Forest and Leeds have now signed up, and that still gives Forest some flexibility with regards to front of shirt. We're back to our friends of Manscaped there. But Leeds have signed a front of shirt deal as well.
This is an interesting one, Kieran. Canada Soccer have applied for a $5 million interest-free loan from FIFA.
Yes. I think it's fair to say that Canada Soccer is in a bit of a mess. You've got the MLS in the USA, which is pretty successful. Clubs tend to do more than break even. The crowds are decent. The TV deal, modest by Premier League standards, but then so is everything. But because they've got pretty tight cost control, the clubs are able to operate pretty decently. In Canada, it's a sport, I still think, which is in seeking a bit of love from an audience, from the authorities. There's been disputes between the men's team and the authorities. And what Canada Soccer have now said is that it's great that we are hosting or co-hosting the 2026 expanded World Cup. One of the consequences of that is that Canada automatically qualify for the competition, which means that they've not got the CONCACAF qualifying rounds to go through. And therefore, how are they going to make any money? Because they're not hosting games, and it would now appear that they've not even got enough money to offer to get people to go and play them in Canada. And that's why they've had to go cap in hand to FIFA. So FIFA has many, many schemes, some of which are very, very meritorious and deserve respect. I give FIFA criticism at times, and I feel that that's warranted, but I also acknowledge that FIFA do an awful lot of good. And you are allowed a maximum loan of £5 million, which would be interest free, but it can't be used just to pay players. Right. So we'll have to look out. I mean, Canada Soccer lost $6 million in 2022, so its finances are precarious. There doesn't appear to be a lot of government interest in terms of supporting the sport because it's not a national sport as such, and the sports authorities, again, governance there isn't brilliant, and it appears to be struggling.
Because we saw the very strange situation last year, Kieran, where the Canada men's team threatened to go on strike because they weren't being paid as much money as the Canada women's team.
Well, yes, and we've got the Women's World Cup taking place in a couple of weeks, and Canada have qualified for that competition. And again, some of the funding is required for the Canadian women's team, and I think their first opponent's Nigeria. The men's team seems to have fallen behind, and this is a function of. We have had we've had a decent sized World Cup in terms of the number of teams qualify. But if you don't qualify, you really do drop off the radar, both domestically and internationally.
We talk often, Kieran, on the pod about a story that starts as a pebble and ends a year later in an avalanche. And as a Palace fan, I'm slightly worried that this story, which was a pebble just a couple of weeks ago, has now been upgraded, shall we say, maybe to a small stone. And it's a story about one of our co-owners.
Yes, this is to do with Lyon. Now, Lyon were acquired by John Textor's Eagle Football Group in December 2022. And as far as French football is concerned, that they like administration. Now, by administration, not the administrators being appointed, but the French like a bit of civil service style work. There's a bit of Terry Collier to throw into the equation, because they have, and this is about as French as it gets, the National Management Control Department for football, and that's a proper official 1970s style sounding organisation. You don't mess with the people from the National Management Control Department, and their aim is to investigate football clubs to ensure that they have the means and the resources to complete the following season, and that's great. Because nobody wants to lose a football club halfway through the season.
Of course not.
And what they can also do is that if they feel that a club has not demonstrated to them that it has sufficient resources, then they have the power to block transfers, to cap wages. There's been talk about Christian Pulisic going from Chelsea to Lyon, and that deal now appears to be sort of scuppered as a result of this investigation. John Textor, as you know, also owns Molenbeek in Belgium, Botafogo in Brazil, and of course he's a part owner of Crystal Palace. And he's sent documents to the National Management Control Department, but I don't think that they're happy enough. So there's a bit of a standoff, and now there is talk about John Textor, who would appear to be, sometimes we use this phrase, asset rich, cash poor, i.e. you own things, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've got money in a bank account. And there has been talk about him transferring some of his share assets into Lyon in order to satisfy the French regulator. But that just seems very odd. You end up with the Brazilian, a Belgian, and part of Crystal Palace being owned by a French football club, and it just seems to be a bit uneasy. So I can understand. I think we are beyond Pebble, certainly, but how this is going to expand is open to question, and it's one of those things which is frustrating because. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're a supporter of Southend or Palace, whoever, you're focusing on the fixtures, you're wondering who you're going to sign, you're looking forward to this, that, and the other, and you've got this sort of this nagging itch that things aren't as good as you would want them to be as far as ownership is concerned. And as an outsider, you've not got people rowing in the same direction. In my observation.
If John Textor fails to satisfy the French football financial watchdog, as I'm going to call it, what sanctions would they have on him? On
him, ultimately, he's a US citizen. So
okay.
there's a limit to what they can do. What they can do is effectively sanction the club that he runs in terms of saying, well, you can't. We'll give you a transfer embargo.
Right, okay.
We'll operate a pretty severe wage cap. And of course, that has implications for the club. I think it finished 7th last season. In the French top division, which all of which is not good for football. We've said on so many occasions that we should be taking 2 months off in June and July, and the shows are longer than ever.
Yeah. We are going to have to take a break at some stage in July, Kieran, because you'll have a nervous breakdown otherwise, like Oliver Hardy when he's driven mad by testing car horns all day and has to have a 2-week break at sea, which doesn't end up well, would you believe? But there will be pods. We're not going to leave you without pods, don't worry. Our first Nostalgia Pod special will be coming up during our July break, including an interview with James Brown, who's Mr. 90s, so that'll give you a clue as to what year we're talking about. Our last 2 stories, Kieran, I think both parties involved in these stories would agree they are operating at different ends of the football spectrum. And the first one is Mr. CR7 himself.
Yes. Cristiano Ronaldo, apparently he's on somewhere in the region of £180 million a year to play football in Saudi Arabia. I say good luck. Yeah, I will. I've always defended whatever a football player is paid, whatever an employer is willing to pay you, take it. So I have no issue with that. You would therefore think that he is in no need of additional coin, but he is signing up for the GOAT range. And the thing about Cristiano Ronaldo, I don't think he's necessarily done this for money. He's done it for vanity. Because I've told you a couple of stories about his vanity off air, and that means that unfortunately we've got the Cristiano Ronaldo range of non-fungible tokens, which will bring you, of course, intangible benefits. Another word for intangible is invisible. Yeah. And you might say, well, he's going to promote these. He's got one of the biggest social media profiles in the world, and he is partnering with our very good friends at Binface, and also known as Binance. And for people not familiar with Binface, stroke Binance, they are a crypto exchange. Now, you might struggle in this country because the Financial Conduct Authority has restricted what they can do. They've had to set up a separate company in the USA away from Binance itself because the US regulatory authorities are unhappy about them. And they've said, well, you cannot trade in dollars in the United States. There's further restrictions in Japan and in Ontario and Singapore. And you go, well, if all of this is just a little bit of football fun, why are these financial authorities taking such a severe line with Binance? And it's difficult to work it out. We've already seen them effectively tweeting, if you like. If you like and follow us and Cristiano Ronaldo and retweet this, we're going to put you in for a free draw for, I think there's normal NFTs, there's rare NFTs for Cristiano Ronaldo, and then there's ultra rare as well. And I've always said, if people want to collect the equivalent of a digital Panini card, go along, enjoy, fill your boots, have some fun. It's not an investment. And that's what you really have to watch out for. I understand people get suckered into it, and in order to be suckered into it, you need to be a sucker.
Kieran, this is not a sentence I ever thought I'd ever utter in my life, but in order to avoid another public apology to Count Binface, can we make clear that there is no connection at all between the company Binance and the Aston? Is also a Palace fan.
Is he?
Yes, Count. Let's make that clear, Kieran. There's no relation between Binance and Count Binface, who is a good friend of the pod.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have no idea what he looks like, but he is a good friend of the pod. And as I say, apparently a Palace fan. If we started the pod, Kieran, talking about Ray Winston not wanting to be a director, but if any of our listeners do fancy that job, there's a club that might be asking them to try their luck.
Yes, this is very weird. It's to do with
Kieran, we've just had to apologise to Count Binface live on air. You can't get much more weird than that.
That's true. Yes, I've never seen a football club advertise on its website for somebody to come in and run it, and that's effectively
that is weird.
What we are seeing from the recently acquired. Recently relegated on more than one occasion, Scunthorpe United, and who are not on the coast, by the way, for anybody that's not great on geography. But this is because they currently have only one director, who is the owner. I don't know what's happened to the finance director since the acquisition, but the accounts are late, and I've got my list of red flags. Well, this is one of them. You would have thought if the new owners come in, will have tidied up the books. For Peter Swan, who was the former owner, who is, I believe, still owns the ground, but I think he's locked out of the stadium that he owns. It's all sort of just surreal and doesn't seem to make any sense. And if the accounts are late, does that mean that there's going to be sanctions employed by the National League? But the club's only got one director. It's advertising for new directors, and it says gives you an opportunity to get involved in decision making at the club, and that's great. I personally would want professional directors to do that job, and the danger is, and this is not a criticism, because I'm sure there are some absolutely fantastic. Well, there are some absolutely fantastic people. So, because I think it's fair to say that quite a few of them have been in contact with us in the last 24 to 48 hours to say we don't feel particularly comfortable with this. There are other outstanding issues in respect of the club, which I don't think it's appropriate to discuss on the podcast at present. Why on earth would you just advertise for a director? You want people who are used to being a chief executive, used to being a decision-making process, used to both producing budgets and understanding budgets, know how to market and so on, and a sort of a come and get me plea from the club just doesn't stand particularly easy with me. Now, I hope that they get some absolutely fantastic applicants and the club goes from strength to strength. But it's a strange way to behave.
Does this advert, Kieran, as a matter of interest, imply that if you do become a director, you have to put some money into the club as well? Or was this kind of a glorified volunteer role?
No, there's no evidence of being a shareholder. Shareholders normally putting it, or to put in director loans. Although I know a few people in football who joined clubs as directors because they were in the legal profession or the finance profession, and it was their club. And they said, well, we were quite flattered at first, and then 6 months later, the chairman comes along and says, any chance of 50 grand? And so, but there's nothing to say that would be the case at Scunthorpe. But it's an unusual way to go about things.
Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to join them and make a small monthly contribution to the pod, that would be very kind of you. And you can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. We shall be back on Monday with our weekly questions pod. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to everybody for Patreon, for supporting the show, and for all of those people. My inbox, both email and direct messages on Twitter, is full to overfloweth. But I appreciate all the good sentiments, and I do try to answer as many as I can. But I do actually have 1,500 unanswered emails at present. In respect of football issues, which is challenging, as well as divorce impending if I'm not too careful. So I need to get the balance right, and I'm fully aware of that. Baroness is very good to me. There's another way, however, that you could support the podcast, and that's to give us a review. I think we're up to number 15. In the sports charts on Apple last week, which we're absolutely amazed about, and we're delighted that you seem to enjoy the show, and we genuinely put a lot of effort into, and honestly, I love it to bits as well. But by all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say as far as your review is concerned. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Ted Hastings of AC12 and Woody Woodpecker as well.
Poor old Woody, he'd get banged up by 15 minutes in for something he didn't do, wouldn't he? That'd be terrible. I've just worked out as well, Kieran, that between us, we have over 1,500 unanswered questions in our email box.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.